That connection that a fan has to their local team, there is no greater one than that. And so I started with that connection of, here's the largest portfolio of local rights in the country. Here is the deepest connection that a fan has with the team. But the business model is clearly broken and challenged. And so I'm also a sucker for a good challenge. And so it's the opportunity to rebuild this ecosystem around the local fan.
Welcome to the Navigating Sports Business Podcast, where we uncover insights from the most prominent leaders in our industry. Welcome to Navigating Sports Media. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Eric Ratchman, Chief Revenue Officer of FanDuel Sports Network. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Umar. It's great to see you.
Where are you joining us from today?
I am in the headquarters here of FanDuel Sports Network, or the Main Street Sports Group, in Southport, Connecticut.
Incredible. And then I asked that because your portfolio is all over the U.S. I'm wondering, you must have to travel a lot to the various different teams or networks. Is that true?
There's definitely travel involved. Obviously, partners are all over the country, both on the team side and on the revenue side. But we've got a great team stationed in many of our regions that handle the day-to-day. So most of my work here is in the New York area.
Amazing. Could you speak a little bit to what your day-to-day is and what does the Chief Revenue Officer for FanDuel Sports Network have purview over?
Well, the day-to-day would be difficult because it is all over the map. But in general, my responsibilities fall into three main buckets. One is, traditional cable satellite distribution, ensuring our product is reaching fans, whether it be through traditional cable channels or through our app on a Roku or Prime Video device in partnership, et cetera. The second one really is ad sales and driving advertising revenue. And the third bucket is our partnerships team. And so that entails, our FanDuel relationship or any partnership that's aligned around the business to drive it forward, whether it be across ad sales, content distribution, naming rights, et cetera. So it really is encompassing the revenue that's coming into the company. I make the money, and obviously other people spend it.
Amazing. Well, to give audience members on how we got you or how you and I know each other, we go back to our days at Disney and ESPN when you brought me onto the business strategy team. From there, you went to Univision, leading the charge on distribution there. And then you've also made stops at Amazon, and found yourself over at FanDuel Sports Networks. Is there anything I'm missing in there or missing in that stop? But it sounds like the culmination of your experiences have kind of uniquely set you very well up for the role and what you just described you do on a day-to-day basis at FanDuel.
I think that's right. I mean, what you and I did at Disney was really, how do we maximize, the reach and revenue of the Walt Disney Company's content assets, both in the U.S. and ultimately around the world. And, that set up the strategy of everything we did from Hulu to, the first sort of virtual MVPD deal back in the day, ESPN 360 or whatever it's called now, which originally launched on broadband. We're thinking about how do we get content in front of customers. Went on to Univision and, drove their distribution efforts around content. At Amazon, I took a step to the other side, right? I wanted to be on the platform side of the business, and get a view there. I was on the content licensing side as opposed to the selling side of the business, but really built the strategy around ad-supported video when it was nascent at Amazon. And then came here, which was really an opportunity to, rethink what this business was for the next generation of local sports fans.
Amazing. And Eric's being humble, but he was really one of the key big architects for helping launch the vMVPD ecosystem at Disney. He's talking about Sling and then also PlayStation View, and then eventually as well as YouTube TV. And then at Amazon, he was leading the charge with Freevee, which has now enveloped within Amazon Prime Video, but is home to one of my favorite shows, Jury Duty. So, you've touched some amazing stuff. And in culmination, what then brought you to take on the role with FanDuel Sports Network? You've been with big brands, big platforms. Obviously sales are a little bit easier when you got the mouse house in your name, as I have learned, and you've probably learned, and you go into other shops, you got to churn the milk to turn into butter a little bit more. But you took on this unique challenge and opportunity with FanDuel Sports Network. Obviously, there were pressures that we have foreseen for a while on the traditional space that have come into a head here and really felt with mainstream sports back then with Diamond Sports. what was your thinking in picking it up, and what were the challenges you saw and the opportunities?
Yeah, well, I think any media business starts with, what is the content and who are the fans of that content? And so when I looked at this business, obviously I knew 3 years ago when I joined, this is a business under pressure. But fundamentally, there is no greater connection than a fan to their local team, right? I was just on vacation with 12 family members in Mexico for a family wedding. And, what were we doing on the night of the Brewers game? We were all at a table together and people were following the Brewers game on their phone, right? That connection that a fan has to their local team, there is no greater one than that. And so I started with that connection of here's the largest portfolio of local rights in the country. Here is the deepest connection that a fan has with a team, but the business model is clearly broken and challenged. And so I'm also a sucker for a good challenge. And so it's the opportunity to rebuild this ecosystem around the local fan, which to me was a really exciting opportunity. How do you take this really strong connection at local level at scale that is not represented anywhere else in the United States? And how do you rebuild the model around that? Well, that's, a really exciting opportunity when you look back at my history in the business and an opportunity to go do that. So that's what drew me to it. Candidly, it was harder than I thought. But that just made it more fun.
Yeah, so how do you feel about the position now that FanDuel Sports Network is in? Obviously, you guys found your way, congratulations, outside of Chapter 11. I was expecting more gray hairs when you got on the video chat here than I see now. But can you talk a little bit about that whole ride, that experience of navigating that and then getting to where you are today and where you sort of see the next 5-10 years for FanDuel Sports Network?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. I guess we start at the origin story. Like, what did we need to do to get out of bankruptcy, right? And emerge, which, by the way, if you look back at any press, I challenge you to find the press article that said we could do it, right? So, everyone was saying it was impossible. There was no way we were going to accomplish that, which, just makes me want to work harder. But what do we have to do? We call it, we had to pull off the triple Lindy, we say on multiple occasions around here. One is we had to line our creditors, who were, we had $9 billion in debt in this company that ultimately our owners, our creditors, had to roll into equity and support our business plan to emerge. So, huge sort of effort on just figuring out the equity piece with our owners. Second piece was teams and leagues. Really, we had to redo all of our team and league deals. None were committed post-bankruptcy. And we had to run the table on our team and league deals to support us going forward. We also had to expand our rights. We didn't have D2C rights for all of our teams within that negotiation. So not only do we have to renegotiate those deals, extend them past the time of bankruptcy, get the teams committed that we really were building the best mousetrap out there for local sports, but we had to get more rights in this ecosystem in order to support direct to consumer. We had to get a new naming partner. We changed from Bally Sports to FanDuel. We had to secure a deal with Prime Video, which was critical to sort of our distribution efforts. And we had to renegotiate every single one of our distribution deals in a period of less than a year because they were all up for renewal. So being able to accomplish all of that in what essentially was an 18-month period and really got compressed down at the end is a huge accomplishment for the team that's here. And if you ask me, like sitting here today, if you said, look back 2 years ago and say, are you going to emerge from bankruptcy with 29 teams, with partnerships with the, leading direct-to-consumer platform and the leading sports book as your naming partner? I think we would have all said that would be awesome for us to accomplish. And we're sitting here today with that as, our baseline post-emergence. And when I look forward, it's only going up from there, right? We are building this next generation sports platform for local sports. And no one else has our scale. No one else has the sort of tech platform, the ad sales piece, the content, the production capabilities that we've invested in to serve local sports. And so I think we are, really positioned well moving forward to build this business to be even bigger than it is today.
Yeah, massive congratulations to you. I mean, I was at the NBA League office, and not to make it about myself, but I had to negotiate rights to take NBA TV, the league network, direct to consumer over the course of one fall. And what you just described over 2 years, what you've done, I can't even imagine the hours, the work. And so massive congratulations to you and the crew to keep the lights on and to keep it going. I'm sure it was touch and go there at many times. But you were talking about building the platform for the future and the next generation. Can you speak a little bit to what you guys are doing on the direct to consumer side? Because I think where listeners know where the traditional media is going and where distribution is there. But we see properties like the NFL and the NBA wanting and preferring to partner with tech, like Amazon is a partner of yours as well. How do you see FanDuel continuing to serve the fans where they are, whether it's on TV or on a direct-to-consumer platform?
Yeah, so on the direct-to-consumer traditional television, we maintain, our access in the cable and satellite bundle, and that's a really important place for customers to continue to find us. I mean, there are lots of customers who love cable television, especially sports fans, because all you got to do is switch the channel back and forth between games and what you want to watch, and we don't foresee that going away anytime soon. In fact, our linear ratings are up year over year on baseball. 8 of our 9 teams are up, and in aggregate, they're up on traditional television. So the fans, sports fans, are very much still in television. But as we know, the next generation fan, my kids, may or may not be, more likely not, are not in cable television. And so if you look at our D2C platform, where all of our content is available on a direct-to-consumer basis in every market, 365 days a year, those fans are 12 years younger than they are in cable television. They are the next generation fan. They are the cord cutters, the cord nevers who are coming up and looking to build, create their own access through direct to consumer. And obviously that gives us a whole degree of flexibility. Also a part of our emergence from bankruptcy is we really took control of our own D2C platform and rebuilt it from the ground up in order to be nimble and fast and be able to build that connection with the customer. And that's everything from dynamic ads capabilities that serve our advertising community, but also, functionality for the fan, like live odds integration with FanDuel or other things here that we will continue to build for the fan. So it's being everywhere the customer is and reaching those fans in the way that they want to reach and the options that they want to have at the end of the day.
So you talked a little bit about the FanDuel partnership, and you talked about sports betting and meeting the fans where they are. Sports betting is getting adopted state by state. It's I think they're at in a majority of the states, but still some big states left to go on. In particular, is there anything you're seeing or you things that you hope to see with sports betting and viewership and how it perhaps helps FanDuel Sports Network, but not only the FanDuel Sports Network, but the teams or even the content experience? I know that was loaded, so you can answer it however you wish.
Well, I think, there's correlation or causation. I'm not sure, which one is which, but people who bet more watch more local sports, and people who watch more of their local team bet more. And so that is a positive flywheel effect, whether it be for FanDuel or for us or ultimately for our teams. And that, when fans are engaged in sports betting, they tend to be more engaged in watching the content associated with that, which ultimately is a self-reinforcing cycle. And so as we build our product base, you don't have to be involved in betting at all to watch and enjoy the game as you always have. But if you do enjoy that as an activity, our product has odds integration today, and you'll never bet on our platform. We're not a sports book. We're not looking to be a sports book. We are just to be clear, like FanDuel and FanDuel Sports Network are two separate companies, right? We are, Main Street Sports Group. We're branded FanDuel Sports Network through a naming rights relationship and a broader partnership beyond that with FanDuel. So that partnership makes a ton of sense because our businesses drive each other at the end of the day. And so what you'll see us build in our product is ways for the sports fan and ultimately the sports bettor to gauge more deeply and follow those sports betting, their sports bets that they make while they watch the game.
Amazing. Well, that brings me to like another piece, like beyond the content, you guys are set up to be the content distributor for the teams, the team partners that you have. And with the emphasis on direct to consumer and the data capabilities that come along with that, you get to understand the audience very well. Of course, now with you guys as somewhat as the middleman, there's probably a level of data that you're comfortable sharing or even legally allowed to share with partners. How do you see, we saw it at Disney, we saw it at other shops where it was so important to understand your consumer and your audience and the data from it. How are you working with the teams themselves in helping they get smarter across their other revenue or business lines to help grow your businesses together?
Yeah, it's a great question. The old relationship in the RSN space, which we don't like to call us anymore. Like we believe as you think about the old model, it's RSNs as you move forward. Again, we're building this local sports platform. Well, how is that different? Well, the first is, we used to be really separate entities, but today we think about it as one team and we're going to market together on reaching the fan of local sports. And that's both in the arena and outside the arena. And so as you think about our team partners, what do they care about, right? Well, they want to build their fan base and they want to ultimately have, drive ticket sales and drive merch sales along that fan base. And what do we want to do? We want to reach fans and drive subscriptions. And so, it's sharing data, which you're right, there is, first party data requirements, et cetera, around that. But ultimately starting to marry up the data between who's in the arena and who's outside the arena, and how do we put those together to drive subscriptions on our part and drive ticket sales and merch on the fan or on the part of the team partner. And so we're working very closely. It starts, with the teams leaning in and driving subscriptions on our part and thinking about how do we target their customer base and their base of data. And then from our side, how do we start to work to bring who's interacting with us that we see as fans to start thinking about ticket offers, merch offers, et cetera, that can get people into the stadium at the end of the day. But we're very much, working on that already. We're leaning in, work very closely with our teams. And we're also working with them on ad sales, right? I think one of the things that we can do that really no one else can do is we can connect advertisers in through the network and into the stadium on a sponsorship basis. And so we go to market together with our team partners and unlock really multimedia sponsorship opportunities that can be taken advantage of, again, in the stadium and then on the air. And that's an amazing extension, again, for both our advertisers and ultimately.
Yeah, when we talk to a lot of our team partners, we kind of see local media as an opportunity for them to understand their fan beyond the arena, whether it's with a partner like yourself or doing it themselves. There are pros and cons to each approach. What we love about the FanDuel opportunity is that you're typically partnered with multiple teams in each market. So you get this bundling effect that you can, probably get some pricing and packaging efficiencies or create at least some good offerings in your marketplace. I'm not asking you to put down any of your competition, but I guess I'm going to flip it. What are some of the things you're seeing that folks that aren't FanDuel are doing well or that you're interested in the local sports space? So to give you examples, it's like the Phoenix Suns, the Utah Jazz, the Dallas Stars, the various companies they're working with. Have you guys looked into those models or have any thoughts on those that you can share?
Look, I fundamentally believe if you go back to our emergence from bankruptcy, we had 29 teams who opted into us because they believed we had the best overall strategy to serve the local sports fan and the local team at the end of the day. So I don't spend a lot of time looking at the competition. I look at how we're building what I think to be the best platform to serve local sports at the end of the day. And I think we have that. And I think our scale, not only do we have the best platform in the individual market, right? But to your point, in a market, we often have 365-degree coverage. So if you're a single team and you're trying to build, a relationship with a fan and it comes in and it goes out, and then you got to reacquire that fan. Well, we're all year round with baseball, NBA, and NHL. And that's a huge advantage as you look at acquiring subscribers and keeping them in your ecosystem. Or if you're an advertiser wanting to stay active in the local market, throughout the year, as opposed to on a one-off seasonal basis. But then what we also have, again, is 29 teams across 15 markets. There's that targeted real personalization and connection at a local level. But then they're scaling that up across 15 markets, half the country here, which means that when you aggregate our viewership across that, we're doing national-like ratings and exceeding often the national ratings of a game on the NBA on ESPN or TNT or the NHL or MLB. Our viewership, because it's so strong in our markets, in each of those markets, has that local connection. In aggregate is national scale. So we bring this local connection at national scale, which I think is really compelling. And when you think again from an advertiser, you're not placing an advertisement at a national where, okay, a third of the audience in the local markets really cares and 2/3 is, sort of tuning in, but it's not their team. When you buy across our networks, you're buying the fans in every market that care about every game because it's their team. And I think that really is an incredible proposition at the end of the day for our scale. It's also really hard to execute these businesses at an efficiency that we can do, right? And again, I'm kind of meandering here, but I'll give you another example on a direct-to-consumer basis. We're not a national product, right? So, if you look at Disney or HBO or any of the other, sort of national platforms, they're executing one product year round. We're getting 29 bites at the apple every year because we are understanding the customer in each of those 29 markets. And that scale and that opportunity gives us a whole lot of opportunity to become really efficient at acquiring and retaining subscribers and ultimately targeting those subscribers through that connection. So there's a whole lot of benefits to that I don't think is replicatable anywhere today in the ecosystem other than at FanDuel Sports.
I love that
Network.
answer. And you said 29 bites at the apple. Is there anything like, across the markets you look at that you see as like best practices or things you've seen that have excited you that you could share?
There's always a thing. First of all, it's capitalizing on that connection to the team. So, and again, I go back to sort of operating as one team. When we have teams that lean in, we see higher performance. So, and all of our teams are leaning in, but there's some that lean in a little bit deeper. I think it starts, if you think about it at the content level, the teams themselves have a direct connection with their fans and are probably like the best on the social media side to execute that connection. And when we see teams talk about, watching, subscribing to FanDuel Sports Network and connecting their players and their social media to us, we see a lift in our ability to, reach subscribers at the end of the day because they have that connection and that social media presence, and they're really good at that. I think also when the teams look to work together on their goals and our goals, ticket offers, right? Where, in some combination, there's ticket together, or we've had sponsors, team sponsors like Truist and the Braves in Atlanta lean into their season ticket holders and sponsoring opportunities. Putting these things together works really effectively when we take team sponsors, ticket offers, and us in putting FanDuel Sports Network into the hands of fans to test it and ultimately buy and subscribe to it long term. Really effective at the end of the day. And something that, again, it's really hard to execute other than on that local level where you have this connection to the team, the connection to the advertising partner, the connection to the ticket holder. So that's where we see that synergy really come together and be able to be 1 + 1 =
Yeah,
3
I
or
love
4.
it. I'm in the LA market, and between the success of the Lakers, the Dodgers, the LA Kings, I think there was some infographic I saw recently that showed if you wanted to, you could have like 75% of your meals taken care of by all the promotions that each team has with the various fast food chains in the market. And it just goes to like the power of sports. I got friends who take advantage of like nearly all of those. And if you can connect those dots, like you just mentioned with Truist down in Atlanta or whoever else who can engage with, across the funnel in the ecosystem, there's like amazing opportunity. I agree, for teams to really maximize their local rights like they haven't before.
That could be ordering a pizza to watch the game on FanDuel Sports Network in your home, or it could be getting a ride, from a rideshare program to the game and getting FanDuel Sports Network when you're not at it. Like, there's so many combinations here that makes sense ultimately for people who want, and for advertisers who want to connect to, the team and the viewer, and that viewer is both in the stadium and outside the stadium. And how do we create something really compelling, ultimately around that?
That's the power, a little bit of the data that everyone can collect now and the opportunities there. We do a lot of work with teams on understanding their data and helping them either connect it with other brands and advertisers or distributors and figure out other revenue maximization strategies. So it's music to my ears to hear that you guys are thinking and speaking that same language. Moving away from FanDuel Sports Network, I'd love to get some of your thoughts just on the general media marketplace, media industry. Are there any stories that have like come up over the last few months or even weeks? It seems like every day there's a new announcement that have really caught your eye, that are probably less obvious.
I don't know about the less obvious ones. I mean, I think, the major story is consolidation in the ecosystem. And I think you look at, the bids for Warner Brothers by Paramount and then Netflix. I mean, I think Netflix surprised me a bit in throwing their hat in the ring, for Warner Brothers. But as you think through it, it probably makes a ton of sense, right? Feed that IP into Netflix, and they can capitalize on it. Perhaps keep it out of the hands of others as consolidation goes on. And you want to ultimately build the biggest moat around what you
And
do.
a healthy
So
sports rights portfolio too, if they really want to meaningfully jump in even more.
healthy sports rights portfolio. You certainly see Netflix, testing the waters there as they, focus on what I call big event strategy. But, Netflix is testing, learning, ultimately, remains to be seen where they go on that. But that would certainly add, a healthy sports portfolio, to them. I think overall, when you look at sports, what you saw initially in all of these, right, was entertainment content. And entertainment content, if we go back in history, right, started with library, right, deep library going to Netflix. And then it was, more recent shows or 1P, for 1P pay windows going, into streaming. So the content went up the chain, and then originals, was the next. And then what you see now is sports, right? And the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because what do you get from sports is you get a known quantity, you get a known audience. If you go back in history, why did Fox get into the NFL in the day, right? It's because you got a known audience that came in, and then you could promote to their shows on their station and go build their station group. Well, it's the same with streaming platforms. You have a given audience that's going to tune in for the game, right? For us, it's 3,000 live events, 90% of local games throughout the year. We know very clearly we're within a very narrow range, depending on up to the matchup, how many viewers are going to come in to watch on traditional television, but also how many new subscribers we're going to get. And so if you're in the business of driving a direct-to-consumer platform, and you can take some of your budget and basically, de-risk it. Because when you go build an original, you spend a lot of money, and you get the jury duties of the world, right? But you also get shows that don't work. And so, but with sports, you pretty much get what works. And yes, when the team performs better, obviously it works better. But there's a range here of what it's going to drive. So I think you will see, the other trend I think you'll see over the next 5 years is, or as rights come up, probably 10 years, 5 to 10 years, is that there will be more sports going to streaming platforms. It hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is where people watch stuff, not what they watch. And I think, the other change is obviously in entertainment, the tune into live has basically gone away. And the last bastion of what remains and will continue to remain is live sports. Again, I go back to sitting around the table in Mexico this last weekend, and what were people tuning into? It was the live game, right? It was the live game in MLB. And the only other thing that got us away from the pool was the Sunday Packer game. And we all went into the sports bar in the middle of a beautiful day on a Sunday to watch the Green Bay Packers play. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same for sports. It continues to be incredibly powerful and important, and now will be incredibly powerful and important for driving streaming.
No, I agree with all of that. And I think the next question I have is you see that there is somewhat a division across all facts of life on like the haves and the have-nots. It seems to be getting more and more exacerbated. You see the rights deal fees the NFL gets, the NBA's gotten. MLB, even though on the national side they got more money with this package that came available, but they had to give up more rights to secure that revenue. Where do you see somewhat like where the non-tier one sports rights, let's say maybe tier three and below, how are they going to help? There was a gold rush to just invest in sports rights and it's somewhat like entertainment. Hope that something pops off and you've got the hit. But now we're seeing more rational spending on anything that's non-premium, is what I'll call that. Where do you see the sort of the next few years on niche sports, non-premium sports rights? How do they cut above the fold?
Yeah. So look, I think we have a really unique offering for tier two, tier three unique sports rights in that, what we can bring, for example, is an end-to-end solution for an upstart league to go build their audience, right? First of all, let's start with producing the content. So we've got Norby Williamson. Norby was at ESPN when we were there, Umar. The best in the business, has produced every live event around the world. And he's got a cadre of really high production people who've also produced every live event from around the world. Well, if you partner with FanDuel Sports Network, you get a production team that can produce those events for you at a really high caliber, but also a really efficient basis. Because again, I go at scale. We produce 3,000 live events a year. When Norby came on board, he talked about at ESPN, he produced 300 NBA, NHL, MLB games a year. Today, he produces 10x at FanDuel Sports Network. So we have a really efficient engine at a really high quality to produce games for potential leagues. Then you go, well, what do leagues need? They need reach, right? They need reach and distribution in order to get in front of fans. Because if people can't find you and they can't watch you, well, then you can't grow that audience. So with us, again, we're bringing in 1.6 million viewers a day onto FanDuel Sports Network across digital and traditional linear. We can put those upstart leagues next to key properties like NBA, NHL, MLB. At the same time, we have national now channels. We've hired the Golics and Golics we brought on air, and they are producing 5 days a week talking about sports, talking about the sports on our air and sports more broadly in general, but they are a giant barter vehicle ultimately for tuning in and engaging with the content on our air. So we have news and information shows that can promote those. And, we're looking to launch our own fast strategy also that pushes that content out even broader. So you get cable content access, you get, national access, you get production capabilities, and integration into our D2C app, or potentially to white label our direct-to-consumer app and run that outsourced for you. So I think if you're a tier 2 or 3 upstart, you got to look at how do I drive the flywheel in my content, right? Which is create the content, get it out in front of folks, and ultimately monetize it. And that subscription and ad revenue, which also we can run. So how do you do that efficiently? Hard, again, as a tier 2, 3 sports network. But if you can find a partner like us who can sort of bring an end-to-end solution to the table for you, I think it's a really compelling offering.
That's awesome. I'd love to move to rapid fire questions and then we can wrap this thing up. This one's supposed to be fun, quick answers, but if you want to expand on anything, please do. And I'll also say that you can't really answer questions exactly based on anything FanDuel related or partner related necessarily. I want some good, unbiased answers. All right, first
I got it.
question.
I'll do my
And this
best.
one you can be biased. Favorite part about attending the University of Wisconsin?
A fall Saturday at Madison, starts out with a game at Randall Stadium, then go, in the evening, hanging out on the terrace at the Student Union, overlooking the lake, having live music and a beer on the terrace with a bunch of friends, like at a Saturday fall at Madison, game day at,
Amazing.
can't be matched.
Favorite streaming platform that you use today?
Oof. That's a good one. And I know I can't answer FanDuel Sports
right.
Network. So, look, I'm going to say Prime Video at the end of the day. because what I love about Prime Video is this aggregated experience where, you can get your sports, et cetera. You don't have to switch between apps. And I think that channel environment on Prime Video is really powerful. It's a powerful tool for FanDuel Sports Network. I know I'm not supposed to talk about it in rapid fire, but as a consumer, it solves one of the problems that's out there, which is having all these disparate apps and going between them. And they built a great mousetrap there.
What's your bucket list sporting event to attend in person?
Well, so I would say I'm going to answer with two. I've never been to the Olympics. I would love to go to the Winter Olympics. I would love to go watch ski racing at the Winter Olympics. Just have never done it. Definitely on the bucket list. And I think, Formula One in Monaco would be the second one that I have not been to that I would love to go see. So
I know you are an avid fan of the outdoors. What's your favorite hike?
Well, most days today, it's hiking along the beach with my dogs. But favorite hike of all time I've done would be probably the Beartooth Range in Montana, which is an incredible hike that
Amazing.
I've done. So.
What advice can you offer to a young person who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I wouldn't try to follow in my footsteps. For those that know my career, like you do, Umar, it's, I started out as a biochemist in cancer diagnostics and somehow ended up in sports media. But, I think there's some generalizations, which is if I go back to ESPN, and you talk to George Bodenheimer, who I have a ton of respect for, in every answer, he would always say, be a student of the business. And I think, continuing to be a lifelong learner and be curious about what's going on around you. That's the first one. The second one is, always be up for a new challenge. The greater the challenge, the greater the reward personally, maybe financially, but just personally and what you accomplish. So be open to challenges, be a student in the business. I think those would be my two biggest pieces. Don't be afraid. It's okay, or maybe it's okay to be a little afraid, and probably good for you. And don't get too comfortable as you go forward. You have to be adaptable because, this business or any business is always changing. So you got to be adaptable.
Amazing. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today on Navigating Sports Media. Really appreciate your insights. Looking forward to see what's coming up next for you and for FanDuel Sports Network. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Umar. This was fun. Love to do it again sometime.